Covert Go Blue. What is time anyway?
Time. So time is the wibbly wobbly, tiny whiny thing that somehow comes out of the somewhere into space that has something to do with time, and it's all controlled by a lord in a blue box.
Oh, it's a good first take, man. It's a good first take. Would you say that time is an illusion? If time were like a token in Magic, would it be an illusion token?
It would either be an illusion token or it would be a copy.
A copy. That's interesting.
Yeah, they put copy tokens in packs now. They just say copy on them. I've got one around here somewhere.
Just a copy of whatever.
Yeah, you just play it and it is a copy. It just says copy.
That's pretty genius, right? Because it just kind of helps you to, so you don't have to just grab some random vampire token and be like, no, this is actually a, planeswalker or whatever I just copied.
I misplay it every time because I forget what it's a copy of, because my brain just doesn't register it because it has art, so you just look at it and you're like, oh, it's got to be like a 1/1, but no, it's like a 6/8 dragon or something, but you don't remember that.
How about it could be a construct as well? It could be a construct token.
Time could be a construct. Like a construct of our imagination?
That's what I'm saying, man.
Okay.
Yeah. You know what else is a construct of our imagination? Is this game, Magic Arena, that we talk about. And this podcast is dedicated to Magic the Gathering Arena. Welcome to the show. My name is Arjuna. I'm one of your hosts. Joining me today, as he usually does, I don't know, is this some kind of master of time shenanigan? Covert Go Blue, you're here every week. What's up, man?
I don't know. I don't know what just happened. Is it still this week? It might be last week. It might be before the card was banned and we're predicting a certain card might get banned. Who knows? I don't know anymore. I'm lost. I don't know when they're listening to this. Is it in the past, the present, or the future? They might be listening to it before we record it. Have you thought about that?
It's very possible. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because Covert Go Blue, what is time anyway?
Time. So time is the wibbly wobbly, tiny whiny thing that somehow comes out of the somewhere into space that has something to do with time, and it's all controlled by a lord in a blue box.
Oh, it's a good first take, man. It's a good first take. Would you say that time is an illusion? If time were like a token in Magic, would it be an illusion token?
It would either be an illusion token or it would be a copy.
A copy. That's interesting.
Yeah, they put copy tokens in packs now. They just say copy on them. I've got one around here somewhere.
Just a copy of whatever.
Yeah, you just play it and it is a copy. It just says copy.
That's pretty genius, right? Because it just kind of helps you to, so you don't have to just grab some random vampire token and be like, no, this is actually a, planeswalker or whatever I just copied.
I misplay it every time because I forget what it's a copy of, because my brain just doesn't register it because it has art, so you just look at it and you're like, oh, it's got to be like a 1/1, but no, it's like a 6/8 dragon or something, but you don't remember that.
How about it could be a construct as well? It could be a construct token.
Time could be a construct. Like a construct of our imagination?
That's what I'm saying, man.
Okay.
Yeah. You know what else is a construct of our imagination? Is this game, Magic Arena, that we talk about. And this podcast is dedicated to Magic the Gathering Arena. Welcome to the show. My name is Arjuna. I'm one of your hosts. Joining me today, as he usually does, I don't know, is this some kind of master of time shenanigan? Covert Go Blue, you're here every week. What's up, man?
I don't know. I don't know what just happened. Is it still this week? It might be last week. It might be before the card was banned and we're predicting a certain card might get banned. Who knows? I don't know anymore. I'm lost. I don't know when they're listening to this. Is it in the past, the present, or the future? They might be listening to it before we record it. Have you thought about that?
It's very possible. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because CGB, today we are talking about the banning of, one of the cards which I think a lot of people thought might get banned in Historic, but it has actually happened this past week. Time Warp has finally gotten the axe. So we're definitely going to be talking, we're definitely going to be talking about that today. We're also going to be using this as an opportunity to just check in on the Historic meta game and just talk about meta games in general. And then I know that CGB, you have some announcements for us that we're going to cover recently. And we will be returning a segment on the show, Gas or Ass. I know y'all missed it. So we'll be doing some of that today. But first, we have to keep the people happy and answer a question from our community. So the Zardoz asks, in the Arena Craft Podcast Discord, which is where you can post questions in the Lightning Round channel, the Zardoz asks, what are your favorite bits of Magic lore? They could be specific cards, sets, books, etc. So CGB, I like this question because you and I have both been playing Magic basically since the beginning. I have taken a hiatus, and perhaps you've had some hiatuses as well. But it's fun to have a really broad chunk of the lore to look back on and think about. So, what are some highlights that jump out to you?
Well, the first thing I want to say, thank you for the question from the Lightning Round section of the Discord, which the Discord link in the description on YouTube should now be working. So go ahead and click that and maybe join if you have a question. And then I'm going to say about Magic lore, it was always a very strange thing when I was young because there wasn't a lot of clear lore. Like Fallen Empires, I never figured out the story. Homelands, there was some Autumn Willow and some Baron Sengir, and I didn't know what their beef was. Ice Age, it got cold. I don't know really what's going on behind the gathering, behind the cards, except for some things in an Inquest magazine here or there. But then as things went on and they started writing and releasing stories, I got to go through those and read those more often. And I did get more into the story through ups and downs. The story has had some very low points where I had to stop reading, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the favorites. And on March 23rd of 2016, this absolute beauty of a self-contained story was dropped on the official Magic the Gathering site, and it is called Sacrifice. And it is from Innistrad. It is a tiny little story. It doesn't have any planeswalkers in it. It doesn't have Avacyn and the battle between her and Thalia and the humans. And it's just a one little story about one small town in the Innistrad plane where something weird is happening. It is the story of the Gitrog monster, a frog horror. Death Touch 6/6. I mean, this card, when you see it, a frog horror. It's got the art has a human's arm hanging out of it.
It's like dangling out of its mouth.
Yeah. And it is so, it immediately says, oh, that's a cool monster. But then when you tie a really nice, creepy, self-contained story around it, the card has always meant more to me for that reason. I crafted this card when it became available in the Brawl Festival on MTG Arena, even though it was in no particular set, and I still haven't played it. I just crafted it because without question, every time I see a Gitrog monster in the wild, especially if I ever see a foil one, I'm like, because and it started with this story. It really did. I played it on Magic Duels a lot, but this is a really sweet story. So if you look up Sacrifice by Michael Yekau, or just search Sacrifice Gitrog Monster MTG Story, or just Gitrog Monster Story, it will come up in Google. And if you check that out, I think it's one of the best. I wish so many more cards had their own story. Not how they interacted with Gideon in the Gatewatch, but their own story like this card does. Because I thought this was awesome. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a cool shout out. That's a great card. Calls back to the first set of Magic that I really played upon my re-entry. So Yep, Plane of Innistrad, definite favorite. You know that. Okay, so since we're talking about that, I have to say that, and we discussed this on a previous episode, but I just love the Nahiri and Sorin story arc,
The
like,
feud.
because yeah, man,
The
like
Rock and Stone Cold. Get it?
talk about a cool I love it. But talk about a ship, man. Like if we're talking about like my favorite fandom ship from Magic, it would probably be Nahiri and Sorin. Just
Oh
because
my.
like they hate each other so much that they kind of love each other.
They
You know what I
didn't
mean?
they didn't like each other at first. It's the plot of every romantic comedy. This one just has a
Right.
lot more death and destruction than the average.
It's just a lot more like people getting implanted into walls while they're still alive happening.
Yeah, 2 or 3 centuries from now, it'll be funny that time that you destroyed his house, his clan, and locked him into a wall. You know, I'll just laugh about that.
They'll chuckle about that while they're smoking in bed, you know?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like, but there is an awful lot of people getting stuck in rocks, you know? It's like he puts her in a rock, she puts him in a rock, she puts his entire family in rocks. Like there's a lot of, and then frickin' Emrakul gets imprisoned in the largest rock we know of, which is the moon. I mean, it's just there's a lot of stuff in rocks in that storyline. And that's a way to write a good story, in my opinion.
Yeah, quality. Good theme, good motif. Yeah, nice to know you're a romantic at heart, though. You know?
I am, I mean, let's face it, like the Magic timeline, the Magic storyline really is just a romance novel at heart. But I actually kind of like that you highlighted the cryptic nature of the earlier Magic sets, because that's actually one of my favorite things about old Magic, and when I was originally playing Magic, was actually not knowing, right? Because like think about how fascinating it was to read a card with a quote from Jaya Ballard on it and just be like, who the hell is Jaya Ballard? Like, Jaya Ballard must be sick, she must be like some badass freaking mage. And like, I almost preferred it when I didn't have a card with her on it. I almost preferred it when I didn't know what was going on, because I just read these obscure references from people like Ashnod or Urza or whatever. And you're like trying to start to kind of put together the story in your mind just based on the art and like these little cryptic flavor texts. And I actually thought that was something really cool about Magic that I feel like we've lost a little bit, is like the mystery,
Yeah, I remember going through the cards in Legends and just trying to, like, some were on the nose like Nebuchadnezzar, but then there was a bunch of cards where it's like, I have no idea who this is or why. It was where Nicole Bolas first appeared. Didn't know why there were Elder Dragons. Yeah, I agree with you. There is something to not having all the information.
Agreed. So it's cool to these days even look at a card like Winota, Joiner of Forces, and think like, man, there's a cool story there, right? And I probably won't read that story if it has been written, but I just like thinking about it, because like I'm sure that there's something with like, maybe Kinnan or Luca, and they're like doing a thing with Winota, and there's, I don't know, just I guess it's all getting back to romance when we really talk about it.
I really don't know, because the Ikoria, I think, was the first.
Prodigy.
I think Ikoria was where they tried to sell the Kindle book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Got
and
it.
I was like, no.
Yeah, I like it better just imagining it in my head. I don't need to read the book.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Well, and thanks to you, the Zardoz, for providing that question. Like CGB said, you can join the ArenaCraft Discord, go into the Lightning Round channel, ask a question, and it might get read aloud on the show. And so, CGB, this
Yes.
brings us to the topic of the hour, the banning of one of the more infamous cards in Magic's history. I mean, okay, this we got the classic, right? Time Walk, which was basically Time Warp with, 3 CMC knocked off of it.
2 mana, take an extra turn, sorcery, easy.
They just didn't, back in the day, they just didn't really value an extra turn that highly.
They value it today. What's that worth? $9,000? Bottle Brush, can we get a price check?
I know, right? I mean, these days we pay 7 mana to do that, and we're happy about it, We pay 7 mana, and we're like, thank you, Mark Rosewater. I appreciate it. We're like bowing down at the altar or whatever. But back in the day, you could take an extra turn for the measly price of 2 mana. And, you know, at some point that revealed itself as being, I don't know, insanely busted. And so they were like, nah, 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 nah. Check it out, guys. The new and improved, shiny model, updated for the way we currently play Magic. 5 mana value. Time Walk. This card's going to be fine. And then what happened? Go Blue.
Honestly, what happened is in modern Magic, like the cards pretty much through the War of the Spark and the Eldraine cycle have become so strong that getting to untap and play more of them before your opponent gets to do something is just even more broken than it was in the past. Probably since Urza's Block. Like Urza's Block, if you untapped, you drew 7 cards and made 1,000,000 mana and decked your opponent with Stroke of Genius. It was good times. Good quality Magic. But nowadays, like just another turn with anything. Like anything is busted. So, big surprise, 5 mana for a Time Warp in Historic didn't last. I think you called that. I think you said it was going to be the card that was banned. I think everybody the week that they announced Time Warp was in Mystical Archive had the idea of making a Simic deck that, you know, used like just Explore, Growth Spiral, Nissa who shakes the world. Everybody was like, that's really good. But what it turned out to be was a mostly Izzet deck that plays Velomachus Lorehold from Strixhaven, the 5/5 flying hasty Vigilant Dragon that then goes into your deck and checks your top 7 and casts that sweet, sweet Time Warp for free, and then just attacks your opponent to death while getting a couple extra turns. And that was it. That's all she wrote.
We found a home for that dragon. And, you know, this beautiful combination of 3 cards, right? Time Warp, Velomachus, and the red sorcery. What's it called?
Mizzix's Mastery might be what you're going to say?
Indomitable Creativity was the one I was thinking of. Right?
Yeah, just another mythic in the deck.
Right, just no worries about that. We'll get into that in a minute. But just, you know, that being the cheating version of the deck, right? Or the cheating engine of the deck. So it's the annoying thing about this deck is it's like a cheat into a cheat, right? Mm-hmm. So you make a token with Dwarven Mine or with your Prismari Command, and then you target it with Indomitable Creativity. And of course, the only creature that you have in your deck is the Velomachus. And then you cheat the Velomachus into play. That's cheat number 1. Then you attack with Velomachus and you get a free Time Warp off of it, hopefully, right? And so that's cheat number 2. If you don't get a free Time Warp, you might happen to also hit a Mizzix's Mastery. And if you conveniently discarded a Magma Opus earlier in the game to, I don't know, maybe enable the combo on turn 3, or maybe you discarded the Magma Opus to make a treasure, which you could then Indomitable Creativity, then you can just do it regularly on turn 4. Either way, this is like giving you so many different ways to get your combo going off. And one of the most tilting things about this deck is that we don't just have 4 hits off of Time Warp with Velomachus, we also have an additional however many Mizzix's Masteries you put in your deck to just get the whole thing going on. So, I mean, it's just like the deck's stupid, right? Like
it is stupid.
When you examine this, if your opponent doesn't have a Doomblade or a counter spell or whatever, then you usually just win the game on the spot when this combo goes off. Even if you don't, it's usually such a massive swing because like basically playing a Velomachus plus a Magma Opus on turn 4 wins a lot of games of Magic. So that's the basic theory behind the deck. I do think it's pretty sweet, actually, that this ended up being the deck that got Time Warp banned, because it definitely, like you were saying, was not part of the original iteration that people were trying. But I think what this highlights is that the obvious answer is seldom the best answer in Magic. And we see this time and time again. People think of something's going to be broken. And if it does end up being broken, it's often on a slightly different vector than we thought it would be.
I think that you're right. I think of Omnath and how everybody knew it was broken, but the version with Genesis Ultimatum wasn't the version that, and Lotus Cobra wasn't the version that took off. It was the adventure build that was more interactive. So usually it's just below the surface of obvious. Usually a broken card is broken, but now you have to find the shell for it that isn't as easily targeted by the opponent. In this case, this Jeskai Turns list was 18% of the Strixhaven Championship metagame, and the most played deck was Is It Phoenix at 35%. So a lot of people had, well, Brainstorm and Memory Lapse are really good, but there was kind of a next level to it, and this Turns deck put up a 61% win rate as a pretty hated deck in this field. But some of these numbers are pretty telling. Like, it was 60% against decks like Is It Phoenix. It was 65% win rate against just the various nonsense of the format. Here it is. Here's where it gets pretty funny to me. It was 60% against mono black aggro, which is like a a very disruptive deck that kind of came along to beat it. Brad Nelson had a stream where he was doing very well with it. Do you remember versus Gruul? It's 66.7%. So now we're getting into like the non-blue decks, right? Decks that can't compete a lot at instant speed and with cards on the stack and things like that. So it's, against aggro, this thing just trounced it. And if you look at the main decks, they don't run like Anger of the Gods or in the main deck very often. They hardly even run much interaction outside of Memory Lapse and Prismari Command. It's just that they get this dragon uncontested and they just win. Now, do you remember Jund Food? Do you remember that deck?
I'll dust off my brain, but I think I can find the little cells in which that deck was stored.
Yeah, about a month ago, 2 months ago for sure, it was considered the best deck, like tier S historic. Jeskai Turns is 82% win rate against Jund Food, the third most played deck in that tournament.
Which is exactly what I said during the first week of this set, is that like these Jund decks do not match up well against Time Warp decks, dude. No matter what kind of Time Warp deck you're playing, Jund just cannot keep up with that.
I mean, that is devastating. You are just not... Jund Food for the tournament had a 39% overall win rate in the Strixhaven Championship, and
it's worth it, dude. All of it was worth it just to see Jund suffer.
Well, Gruul aggro, considered the best aggro deck, 31%. Like, well, aggro's dead.
What I think tells a lot of that story in my mind is Prismari Command. Think about how good Prismari Command is against that deck. Imagine your opponent swings in on their Embercleave turn, right?
Oof.
They flash in their Embercleave. I don't know. You just kill the Embercleave and one of their attackers. How do they recover after that? How does Gruul recover after that?
Well,
that's like, questing beast or bust.
Yeah, they'll probably play a few creatures and get some damage in. The problem is the next turn you never let them have another turn. So GG's. Totally. Yeah, you're just done.
Or even, just think about like how hard a Magma Opus is for that deck to deal with. Like, kill one of your creatures, make a 4/4. That's like, okay, the next turn they either have to Embercleave or bust, right? So I think that one of the big issues here, one of the really telling things about an aggro deck like Gruul is that it's really like, it's not designed to go long, right? And so like Gruul wants to kill you on turn 4. Basically, that's the plan. Kill him on 4, hopefully just have like a hasty follow-up to end the game if it doesn't end on turn 4. Maybe, you top deck a haste creature after they wrath or something and you win anyway. But like, if you can just juke them or kind of hit them really hard on one key turn in the mid game, and then you have any kind of follow-up, like that deck folds very quickly. So it doesn't surprise me. And I do think that these Jeskai decks, especially with access to cards like Lightning Helix, can just shut out a deck like Gruul so hard.
I think that what's interesting about the deck, the Jeskai Turns Velomachus Lorehold deck, just the amount of like Strixhaven and Mystical Archive cards played in basically a 2-color deck. The only white card here is the Lorehold Dragon itself. You have Brainstorm, Memory Lapse, Mizzix Mastery, and Time Warp, all as 4-ofs for most of the versions of the deck. And then out of Strixhaven proper, you have 4 copies of Prismari Command, 4 copies of Magma Opus, and 2 copies of the Dragon. That's a lot of fresh cards. And it's also very much like a mystical archive tribal. I mean, there's 16 rare and mythics out of the mystical archive. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of pros after the event floated the idea that the mystical archive itself was a mistake and that they should get rid of a whole bunch of these cards to bring the power level back down. And instead, they went with Time Warp. Time Warp got the boot, and it doesn't seem like they're as nearly as concerned about Magma Opus and Mizzix Mastery. They're not as concerned about Memory Lapse and Brainstorm, despite the absolute domination of blue and red decks. Every single deck in the top 8 was blue and red in Historic. 31 out of 32 copies of Brainstorm because Seth Manfield is a troll and only ran 3 for some reason.
Did you know what that reason was?
He probably couldn't afford it. Probably couldn't afford the wild card.
Yeah, broke Seth Manfield. No, he actually posted on Twitter. He was like, I misclicked and registered 3 instead of 4. It was literally just like an error.
Well, we couldn't have all perfect brainstorms. No. Okay. So
CGB, this is obviously why Brainstorm wasn't banned. Is they were like, oh, only 31 copies, not broken.
Seth, why?
This is why we can't have nice things, Seth. So, yeah, but I mean, so what do you think about this? I think a lot of people were surprised that Time Warp was the ban. Do you think that it's surprising? Like, is that the first thing you would have reached for on the ban list?
I'm surprised because I don't think it's going to... I think it's just going to make the format one less combo deck, but I think a lot of the same cards will be good. Because if you cut Time Warp from this deck, I don't know if you still want to do the Velomachus Lorehold, Indomitable Creativity stuff, but you just find whatever the next big thing is, and you do that thing.
It becomes like a Gearhulk deck, right? I mean, I think it's still pretty strong.
Or, do you remember what the best deck was a few weeks before this deck was really found? What everybody was worried the format was going to be? It was Jeskai Control, which has a lot of the same cards. Just instead of killing you with Time Warp and Velomachus Lorehold on turn 4 or 5, it will kill you over 50 turns with a Teferi ultimate. And which, I mean, does that make Historic a better place? I don't think so. I mean, if you'd cut the Time Warps, the Loreholds, and the Creativities from this deck, and you add Teferi, Narset, and Counterspells, or Wrath of God, like, you have almost the same deck.
I mean, I can attest to how strong that Jeskai deck is. I have been playing a lot of Control in Historic over the last couple of weeks. I've been playing various Gearhulk decks that admittedly weren't very good. But one of the decks that's been giving me the hardest time is surprisingly this Jeskai Control deck. And you know what really puts it over the edge for me is freaking Expressive Iteration.
Yeah.
This card, like in a Control matchup, it's a nightmare, dude. Like, because you kind of feel like you can't let it resolve because your opponent just gets so much advantage from it. But then the problem is you spend your counter spells dealing with that, and then they just slip a Narset or a Teferi in past you eventually. It's going to happen. It just provides... I feel like the deck has a few too many spells that you can't afford to let resolve, and they're going to get one of them on you eventually, and it's brutal.
Oh, yeah. So, endless value. Yeah. It's just endless value. They're always, if you're not pressuring them, they're just always seeing more cards. So your threats have to be endless, which is asking a lot against a Magma Opus and Wrath of God deck.
It's also just so tilting, like resolving your own Narset and then getting it killed by your opponent's Lightning Helix is just so tilting, right? Because a lot of, these Azorius control decks in the past have had to, they've had to spend pretty expensive cards to get rid of your Narset, right? If they, you sneak it past their counter magic and you feel all clever, and then they basically, they have to cast the cast out, right? Like a 4-mana card to deal with it, or they maybe have to shock it, or they maybe have to Teferi tuck it to get it off the board. But now they can just dome it. They, even if they don't have their access to that counter magic, they can just freaking kill it after you tick it down. So there's just, there's a lot of things about this deck that are surprisingly tilting.
Yeah, and then you don't tick it down, but they have Prismari Command and Helix, and it's gone anyway, and you just spent 3 mana, and that's it. It's... So I think Jeskai Control is dangerous, but in lieu of this ban, I think the most dangerous deck by far is it Phoenix? And
Phoenix.
Yeah, there was some cool data shared online. MTG Data is a really good follow on Twitter if you haven't. And so Phoenix posted as the biggest percent of the meta, 35%, considered an A tier deck going in, posted a 52% win rate. But if you look into it, it was 40% against Jeskai turns, which was the second most played deck and the highest portion of the winner's metagame. Every other matchup against a known meta deck is positive. And some are insanely positive. Jun Food, 68%. Jeskai Control, 57%. Mono Black Aggro, 56%. Selesnya Company, 69% nice. Gruul Aggro, 77%.
Brutal.
Yeah. So, and that deck lost nothing. Except its number one Predator.
Well, and so I think that matchup against Gruul should tell you everything you need to know about how dangerous this deck is, right? Like the fact that they can just consistently outrace Gruul, because I mean, you know, that they're doing a little bit of controlling. They have burn spells. I don't know, they might bring in a Prismari Command post board, stuff like that. But like, I think a lot of matches they're just killing the Gruul player quickly. And I think that one of the things this is highlighting to me is that cards like Faithless Looting and Brainstorm make the deck consistent enough that you can actually execute your Phoenix plan pretty well. And that was one of the main questions that we were having about this deck coming into the format is, do we have the tools to actually find the Phoenixes and actually get them in the yard quick enough? And I think in average, the answer is yes.
Between Brainstorm and Faithless Looting, you have very cheap ways to get deeper in the deck. Expressive Iteration, like you said, is still a rock star. Prismari Command is an interactive piece that Gruul hates that can also dump Phoenix into the graveyard, but a lot of decks don't even run it. But the real thing with Phoenix that I found playing the deck is you run a lot of Pillar of Flames, a lot of Shocks, a lot of Lightning Axe. In the matchups where those have targets, where those just kill something, you're playing aggro and control at the same time. You're killing their things and you're making threats for free. It's too much. Or if you have a Sprite Dragon, you're growing your threat for free. It just absolutely dumpsters decks where their creatures die to shock type effects. And if you thought Bone Crusher Giant was like suppressive in standard, well, now you're looking at historic, where if your card dies to a shock, you're basically saying, I'm throwing away whatever mana I put into this, and my opponent's getting a 3/2. It's not great. It's not great.
No, it's true. And I mean, you're right that it's a deck which can answer a turn 1 Llanowar. It can answer a turn 2 Gruul Spellbreaker for 1 mana, right? Think about how savage Lightning Axe is against Gruul.
Pretty brutal.
Yeah, you know, I had my dream curve. I have a Spellbreaker on 2. It's a 4/4. It's coming in. Nope. My opponent answers it for 1 mana and leaves up mana for my next play or advances their own game plan. So yeah, it's you're right. Like it's just it's a nightmare.
Somebody's going to point out that the Spellbreaker has hexproof on your turn. That's fine. This deck doesn't. It does everything on its own turn. They're instants, but you play them at sorcery speed so you can get back your birds. So you're fine taking 3 from that Spellbreaker if you're just going to smash it for 1 mana and make a 3/2.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, like, how does Gruul deal with a Sprite Dragon? I mean, it's like if they can't kill it immediately, that thing's just going to dome them.
Yeah, you know? They've got to have Bone Crusher on time. On time. Yeah. It's a bad matchup. And I think that the win rates shown there show that Brainstorm is going to be a problem, because why would you play a deck without Brainstorm when you can play a deck with Brainstorm? Other decks have to draw their good cards in the right order. Brainstorm decks get to just sculpt their hand over 1 or 2 turns and then take over the game with whatever cards they want to. And the Magma Opus Mastery thing that is also, I think, a part that we're not giving enough credit for, just dumpstering the aggro decks. Because if turn 3 is kill 2 to 3 of your creatures, basically sweep your board, and make a 4/4 and draw 2 cards, what are you gonna do? You said maybe they'll have a questing beast. Come at me, bro. I'll take one more 1-for-1 trade with your 4 mana play. That's fine. Let's go.
Yeah.
So I thought Mastery would get banned, to be honest. I thought Mastery is a bit much. I'm not sure why that card is in this format. I don't know why they thought this was the card that they had to add to the Mystical Archive. Time Warp, I kind of get it. Let's push the boundaries and do something flashy. Clearly, players enjoy this effect, or there wouldn't be Nexus trolls the way there was. But Mastery, I don't get why we needed this.
So here's what I hate about Mastery is that if you look at that card, there's just like 5 competitive-ish decks right off the dome that you can think of to build with Mastery, right?
Yep.
Like, you know, you have this Velamarcus deck, you have any Magma Opus deck, you have like various Ultimatum decks that you could try to put together. I mean, there's a lot of good ones, there's a lot of good Ultimatums in Historic, and you can play basically any of them with Mizzix Mastery if you feel like it. There's also Dragonstorm. That's another deck which actually showed up in this tournament. Didn't seem to do that well, but maybe it was just because it wasn't the best Mizzix Mastery deck in the format. So that deck, who knows? That could still be strong. The point I'm making is when it's easy to list off a bunch of decks that seem fairly good-ish with Mizzix Mastery, like this causes a problem, right? Doesn't it feel like it just has to leave the format eventually?
I also just think that the amount of feels bads from people using Graph Diggers cages, things like that,
God,
because of the templating for the card, because it exiles the spell, then casts it. It gets around a lot of the cards that you're used to, and it's just a weird card. Also, the overloaded version of the card is such a free roll, and we saw in the top 8, there were games that in the post-board games, when people do bring in their sideboard hate and their interaction and their plan is to kill the dragon and things like that, if they don't clock the deck, the Jeskai deck could just play this slow game, grind it out, and then win with an overloaded Mizzix Mastery that casts 2 or 3 Time Warps out of the graveyard. It's such a weird card that I wish it weren't there.
I agree. Yeah, it just seems, I think it answers the question of like, is a 4-cost sorcery fast enough for Historic? And the answer is definitely yes. So this is one of the things that we're figuring out, right? Is what's the speed of the format? What's the power level of the format? Obviously, Wizards is just freaking spinning the roulette wheel with each new release that they're making here. But you know, as we're definitely seeing here, like you can play expensive cards in Historic because there are enough ways to cheat them. And, you know, and again, one of the unspoken things that's going on here is that you can afford to put stupid cards like Magma Opus and Mizzix Mastery and stuff in your deck when you're running Brainstorm, because when you have an opening hand with too many of them or whatever, you draw too many of them in the first couple of turns of the game, you just brainstorm them away. So Brainstorm is kind of providing this enzymatic level of selection and control over what you do in Historic, and it's making it a lot more possible to do stuff like play a Jeskai deck with a bunch of answers in it and just get rid of the ones that aren't good for you, right? Or play a combo deck with a bunch of stupid cards in it and just get rid of the cards when you don't need them. So I think that it's easy to look at some of these results and say, well, Brainstorm's a good card, but it's only good because, you know, these blue decks were good, right? These Izzet decks were just powerful. They were playing other cards that were good. And because Brainstorm is a good card, we're just going to play it in all of them. But I think people are maybe missing, if they're not taking Brainstorm seriously, they're missing all of the various little interactions that it is creating, or all the various ways that it's smoothing over problems that these decks would otherwise run into.
I'm kind of amazed at this point when I brainstorm and then shuffle away some stuff and then brainstorm again and don't have exactly what I want. And that just tells you how stupid it is. Because you shouldn't be able to spend 1 mana and a fetch land and 1 more mana and have the perfect hand. But that's the expectation I have now when I play these decks. I had the pleasure of testing Jeskai turns against somebody who's playing a tournament this weekend before the ban came out, and I was the turns player, and they were playing a Demonic Pact deck that was Abzan, so it didn't have blue. It had Thoughtseize and some hand interaction, but it just didn't have blue. And I would just mulligan. It didn't matter if I kept 6 cards, 5 cards, whatever. As long as I got to like turn 2 or 3, do something close to combo and have a brainstorm somewhere in there. They were just dead. As soon as he played a Demonic Pact, he was just dead. It was ridiculous. And I think this deck had to go, but I don't think it's enough to change the format. Do you agree with that?
I think so. Or if by change you mean balance, stabilize, make
Mm.
fair, make fun the format, then I definitely agree with that. I think that there are definitely still bans to be made. I feel 100% confident saying that. And I mean, just to be clear for the record, I like personally all of these cards they put into historic. I don't have a problem with them putting powerful cards into historic as long as they're paying attention to the meta game and making sure that stuff stays, balanced-ish and fun-ish, then I'm totally fine with that. But yeah, I mean, we're not done.
We're not
We're
done.
not done.
And on
Yeah.
that note, I think it's just a little bit about the economy of the situation here. The day before this Time Warp was banned, I was asked by that friend who wanted to test for a tournament to craft this deck. And I looked and I opened the deck and I immediately saw what it would take to craft it. And I was like, oh, this is why you got me. Because
Right.
I'm looking at between Indomitable Creativity, Mizzix Mastery, Time Warp, Magma Opus, and Velomachus Lorehold, I'm looking at 18 mythic wild cards.
Ooh.
18 mythic wild cards. And then on top of that, you have the rares that were never rare before. Brainstorm, Memory Lapse, Prismari Command, which I think is a very safe craft for the record. But, I mean, we're like, that's without going to the sideboard. And when they banned Time Warp, a few of those cards become a lot less good. I would say Indomitable Creativity is much less good. Probably not something I wanted to spend 4 wild cards on.
That card was basically a meme in historic before Time Warp was printed. So yeah.
Yeah, so goodbye Mythics, and I'm not getting those back. And what I want to say to those thinking about crafting into the next Mizzix Mastery deck that you see, I don't know if you want to, because as soon as Mizzix Mastery is gone, Magma Opus is still standard playable, but I don't know if it's going to be historic playable. It's good with Gear Hulk, but it's not the same level of broken at all. So watch out, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just treat your wild cards carefully if you care about them. And yeah, man. I mean, it's hard, right? Like, this is a hard discussion because obviously mythic cards are good. And I think usually in Magic decks, it kind of turns out where the combinations of cards make it so that you're not having to invest all of these heavy hitting wild cards to play a deck. But every once in a while, a deck like this does come along. And I think it's smart to just, like, if you're worried about the cost, be worried about it. Don't craft the deck,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
In historic.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, I think it's pretty safe, especially like this, right? You have so many of these, kind of meme cards or cards that don't fit as easily into other stuff. Like, for example, Brainstorm or Memory Lapse. These are cards on the other end of the spectrum. Like, 100% craft them as soon as you can, because either A, they're going to go into every deck and they're going to be great, or B, they're going to get banned and you'll get them back. And likely the other cards that you play with around them are still going to be good cards. So, if I was going to craft into a deck in historic, like, Phoenix is a much better deck to craft into, right? Because, like, a lot of the cards in that deck are commons and uncommons, the rares and mythics. I mean, the only mythic in that deck, right, is the Phoenix itself, I think. And then any of the rares that get banned, you get your wild cards back and it's not that big of a deal. So I actually think that if someone wants to be competitive in historic, that's a fairly cheap deck to get into right now.
Yeah. And just good advice in general. If you're worried about the price and what if this gets banned, try not to do it. Try to play a different format or a different deck.
It seems obvious, but I think sometimes people need a reminder, like, it's okay. People do this in paper all the time, right? People look at a modern deck and they're like, do I want to drop 1 to 2K on this deck? X card might get banned and they don't craft it, or they don't buy it, right? And I think that's a very common Magic question to ask yourself. So you don't have to feel like you're being a wimp or some risk averse person just to avoid investing. Cool. All right. So that was a kind of touch on historic and the historic meta game. Still a very interesting format. I highly recommend playing it right now. It's very fun. But I wanted to, before we get into some announcements, I wanted to touch briefly on another deck which showed up big time at the Strixhaven Set Championship, and that is the Jeskai Mutate deck in Standard. So I think I, like many people, was totally blindsided by this deck. I had not heard of it before the tournament. I do, of course, remember there being previous iterations of the Jeskai Mutate deck, which were, I remember you actually introduced me to one of those, CGB. And while that deck was fun and could have some very powerful turns, it was definitely not really a player at all in the competitive meta. So it was pretty cool to see how the introduction of a couple of cards, such as the Goldspan Dragon, which is really a centerpiece of that deck, have really put it on the map. So CGB, why don't you explain for me and the people a little bit more about the theory behind this deck and what it's trying to do?
I have an issue with something that you said. You said we're going to briefly touch on this. I don't think that's possible.
Okay, all right. Fair. I have, as you will soon find out, I have tasked CGB with the impossible, which is explaining what is maybe one of the hardest to play and most complicated combo decks that we've seen on Arena in a long time.
A very, very, very just beaten into the ground subreddit since Open the Omen Paths was spoiled is a Jeskai Mutate combo deck with Vadrock, Apex of Thunder, which involved mutating Vadrock, casting Open the Omen Paths to generate the 4 mana that you can only cast on creatures or enchantments, using that mana to mutate something else, which lets you get that mutate trigger, as well as the Vadrock trigger, making 4 mana to again mutate. So if you get in a way to draw cards, and you draw enough mutate, in theory you go infinite, draw your deck, and find a way to win. So that's where it started. By the time that like Kaldheim was out and before Strixhaven came out, there were some pretty neat things you could do. You could use the Search for Glory tutor enchantment to get an Orvar of the All form, put that onto the battlefield, and then use Defiant Strike on your mutated creature to make copies of it until you had like 50 copies, and if they had haste, you could then attack for the win. It was some pretty cool stuff, and I've made videos with all these iterations. Some big brains figured out that all that memeing is nonsense and that we got the cards we needed and a different kind of mana battery out of Strixhaven. And the key cards from Strixhaven are number 1, Expressive Iteration. Expressive Iteration just gets you through your deck and gets you to the right pieces. In the past, the deck ran See the Truth, because if you mutate a Vadrock, Apex of Thunder, you cast See the Truth from your graveyard. And that means that you get 3 cards instead of the look at the top 3, pick 1. But that got cut for Expressive Iteration, which basically does something close to See the Truth all the time. It always gets you 1 card, gets you another, and you have that selection. And usually at least 1 card from your See the Truth was a dud anyway. You didn't need all 3, you just needed a few of the right ones. Expressive Iteration is just full-time See the Truth better in a lot of cases. And then the other one is Prismari Command. Prismari Command fits the bill of being able to get cast by a Vadrock, Apex of Thunder, and it creates mana. It creates a treasure. So the reason that we no longer need Open the Omen Paths or the other Defiant Strike or any of the other mana generation that it used in the past to go infinite is because if you have a Goldspan Dragon and you mutate Vadrock, Apex of Thunder onto the Goldspan Dragon, it will create a treasure because you targeted the Goldspan Dragon with the spell, even though it's a creature spell because of the mutate. Then you will use the Vadrock to cast Prismari Command. You don't have to do this always, but you can target the dragon for 2 damage and create a treasure, which creates a total of 3 treasures from the exchange. You spent 4 mana, you made 6. So it's a great way to start getting ahead on mana. Now, you can't target your dragon too many times, you'll kill it, but you can use Unsubstantiate to return these things to the hand, make another treasure, replay them, again, continue the loop. If you throw in a Lordrakis, getting something like returning a Spikefield Hazard to your hand, the Spikefield Hazard can target your dragon, which, of course, makes a treasure for 1 mana that you use for 2 mana because of the dragon. Now, you might say, CGB, you're bouncing the dragon to your hand. You can't use, then your treasures only tap for 1. You can't replay the dragon. You sacrifice them with these things on the stack, like the Unsubstantiate, targeting the dragon. You resolve the treasure, you sacrifice, you make all the mana, you return it, you replay the dragon, you replay the mutators. Once you have enough mutation going on that you can just continue the cycle. You make all the mana you need, and you end up having the kill condition. You don't need like a giant hasty creature. You don't need anything too crafty. Your kill condition is, again, Prismari Command, because you can just target the opponent's face.
Pointing it to the face. Yeah, after all of this has taken about 10 minutes to set up or whatever.
Minimum.
So, I mean, if you haven't seen this deck in action, I would highly suggest watching someone like Covert Go Blue, or maybe go back and watch the VODs of the set championship. Watch someone really good with the deck play through it for a while, because otherwise you will just, you'll lose your combo pretty quick. You'll run out of gas, you'll run out of momentum, and you'll probably just lose horribly.
Oh, it's worse than that. Like this deck lives on a knife's edge. So I recorded with it today, and I had to play. I've played a lot of games of Vadrock recently, both in Brawl, which is a whole other story, but trying to get the same thing to happen, and in Standard with Jeskai Mutate. And like I lost 4 of my first 5 games badly, but every single time I could look and be like, okay, this is where I messed up. This is where, and it was like a really tiny mistake or something that you could easily do. So this is a big brain deck. If you watch my videos, I am very much not an expert. I am trying to find my way, and I at least try to explain what's working, where it works, why it works. And I definitely locate some of the pitfalls that you fall into just trying to play this like a regular deck. And if you watch a pro play it, you can learn a lot there, although you won't probably get them talking through why they do what they do. In fact, it's almost funny to hear commentators who have never seen the deck before try to explain why or what is going on, because it is a gigabrain high IQ build that takes a lot of practice. And it does. We might do it someday. We talked about it. I hope we don't false promise here, but it probably does deserve its own show.
I think so, yeah. I mean, this is like, if you've ever played, for example, the what was that Teamer enchantment that draws a bunch of cards and you deck yourself and win with I can't remember the name.
Song of Creation?
Song of Creation.
Oh, that's easy mode compared to this.
That's what I'm talking about. So if you've ever played a Song of Creation deck and you understand like the thought process that goes into a deck like that, or maybe if you've played like an Underworld Breach deck, that's another example of a deck that kind of requires a little bit of braining and planning and taking 30 actions in the same turn or whatever. So this is like those decks, like multiplied by a factor of something in difficulty. So just to give you an idea of how hard it is.
The brutal part of it is not only do you have to like think through your plays, your other big competition is the rope, because the timer will just run out on you playing this deck. So if you're taking your time setting it up and thinking about all the ways to set it up, you won't have enough rope to even complete the turn or the kill. And on top of that, I mean, I should save this for the episode dedicated to it, but on top of all that, even if you play fast, sometimes you can't complete the kill in the turn, and you have to know when you're on 0 timeouts, because if you go to your end step and the auto, like with no timeouts, and the discard does it auto for you, it will just discard all the wrong cards. Whereas if you go to the end step and leave enough time to discard down to hand size, and you keep all your counter spells, you're probably going to win anyway. But if you don't leave enough time, of course the auto discarder will just dump all those, leave your lands, and then you die a horrific death. It is such a hard deck to play, and you have to know that sometimes even playing it perfectly, you won't actually complete the combo when you have it, so you have to make sure you like survive the next turn with a handful of counter magic.
I mean, here's another nightmare. Imagine trying to play this deck in a match against the Is It Dragons list, which is full of its own burn and counter spells and Brazen Borrowers and stuff.
Oh, I found that easy mode.
Oh, really?
Oh, this deck, it looks, and when you hear mutate, you think it folds to removal, counter spells, and interaction. Not really. It is a really pesky deck to get around, because it's not that hard to maneuver yourself into a place where you resolve a dragon, and at that point the game is kind of over. In a lot of ways, what the people who played Mutate discovered is this is a better version of the Prismari Dragons deck.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Less adventure, more mutate. Who would have thought?
I would have just imagined that it would be very, very hard to prioritize how to play your combo when your opponent has access to like a Bone Crusher that can kill your dragon in response to you dealing damage to it, or, you know, can kind of disrupt you at a key moment in your combo where you actually end up losing your dragon, or you actually end up screwing yourself over, because a large part of the deck is actually bouncing stuff back to your own hand and dealing damage to your own creatures and stuff. So did you not find that to be a problem when the opponent can kind of interact with you on the stack and kind of mess up your plans?
That's the fun part, to be honest. I mean, every time that you get a huge stack with a bunch of targeting of your dragon, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to have all the mana I need now. Thank you. I was going to unsubstantiate this dragon eventually anyway. And unsubstantiate is such a key card because you really do need it to both keep your opponent from doing their game plan and to keep your dragon alive. It is very much a bounce your own card in this deck, which I think a lot of people miss. It's one of the easiest things to mess up. But yeah, the trick is when they start targeting things, you just have unsubstantiate and you just keep piling onto the stack until the last thing is the unsubstantiate. And it's like, thanks for the free treasure, bro.
Yeah, I guess that's true. In a way, they're helping your combo by targeting your dragon.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, this is just another example of how big brain the deck is. So, but check it out. I mean, it's like one of the coolest and most fun decks that I've seen on Arena in a long time.
It also came out of somewhat nowhere in the STRIXHAVEN Championship, this new trimmed down version, and it put up a 61% win rate in Standard, which is better than the next 8 decks above it in metagame share. 15 people played it. So above it was Mono Red, Mono White, Dimir Rogues, Cycling, all of those under 50% win rate, by the way. Gruul Adventures, Naya Adventures, Is It Dragons? Those slightly over 50. And then the number one deck in the format that everybody knew coming in, the deck you've been down with since day one, Sultai Ultimatum. Most played, 20% of the meta, 47% win rate.
Oof.
They figured out how to kill it.
Yeah. Kind of brutal. I mean, yeah, that deck probably does not play well against combo, would be my guess. So yeah, man, I mean, it's kind of funny to think that I'm not sure how many people, if any, did this, but it's funny to think that 2 Jeskai combo decks based around Strixhaven cards were like the best decks to play at that, you know, that tournament, which I think is a little bit, it's fitting, right? The Strixhaven Championship, we got to actually demonstrate why some of the cards in this set are as good as design obviously thought that they were, right? Because I think when we were evaluating the set, we were looking at cards like Magma Opus, like Prismari Command, even Expressive Iteration. I mean, we both knew that was going to be a good card, but it was hard to tell exactly how actually disgusting that card is. And so this, I think, has been definitively proved. These cards are good. Build decks around them. It's going to turn out.
Yeah, I think that if you had asked before the set came out, like, would Strixhaven impact Standard meta, the answer would be no. But it showed up big time in both his historic, unsurprisingly, I would say, but in Standard, Prismari Command and Expressive Iteration did a lot to shape this format. And the decks that had great win rates, I think it also kind of shows that, in a way, it's Prismari is Strixhaven. Like, the Prismari house won the cup on the DL. You know what I mean?
Definitely. No question. With an honorable shout out to Lawhold. But really, yeah, Prismari it is. And of course, going forward post-rotation, I expect a lot of these cards to be some of the better cards in the format. So yeah, my guess is that Prismari is going nowhere. It's probably only getting better over time.
Blue-red is here to stay.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, well, for our final segment here, Covert Go Blue, I'm excited for you to take us through some announcements and to do a little gas or ass. So what's going on with that?
All right. Since we are the Arena Craft Podcast, the podcast dedicated to things in Magic Arena, I'm going to try, let me know if you like this in the comments or in any kind of feedback like Discord. We're going to try going over some of the events that are coming up here in the month of June and talk about whether or not we're excited about them or just basically give a reaction to them in the gas or ass format where I'm going to pitch them to Arjuna and we're going to get his take. And the first one, Jumpstart. So Jumpstart should be live on the client right now. I believe, yeah, it says dates are June 4th through July 8th. So it's going to be running the rest of the month. So gas or ass on Jumpstart, kind of this pre-packaged way to play Magic in a can. It's kind of like a weird combo of constructed in limited. I don't quite know how to explain it, but take it away.
Okay, so the idea of Jumpstart is gas. I love it. I love what they're trying to do there. I love what they're going for. I think it's a really cool way to get people into limited. It's also just a really cool way to get people into Magic, right? If you have a friend who's never played Magic before, I love the idea in paper of being able to buy Jumpstart packs and say, look, you put 2 of these together, you got a deck. It costs, they're kind of cheap, right? They tried to make it accessible. So the idea of it is gas. The implementation of it, however, in my opinion, is ass. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is that a lot of the cards in these decks just suck. And it's not just, okay, I play a lot of limited, right? I play a lot of limited. I'm used to putting very, very subpar cards in my deck. But these are they break through the floor on how bad these cards are. I mean, they've got just awful. I wish I could think of some examples, but you look at these cards and you're like, I would never in a million years put this card in my deck. I would never select this from a draft. There's just no circumstance in which I would play this card. If this was in my sealed pool, I'd play anything else, I'd splash something that was probably just going to sit in my hand because I have a terrible mana base. I don't care. I'm not playing this card. So there were so many bad cards in the format that it kind of ruined it. Another thing that made it kind of ass was that some of the decks are really lopsided. So for example, I was playing in a matchup where my opponent resolved a Baneslayer Angel. And I was like, sweet, my deck doesn't have a Baneslayer Angel, bro. And it feels so much worse because in sealed or in regular draft, you at least feel like you had a shot, right? You got to see a lot of packs. You got a fair amount of agency over your deck. Whereas in this format, it's like, I got 2 packs. I opened 2 packs and whatever they were, I play them, right? And if my opponent got the Muxus pack or, the Baneslayer Angel pack, they're just so far ahead of the game. So there are a lot of feels bads like that. The final thing I'll say is that it did introduce some kind of problematic cards to the historic format like Muxus. I think the whole conversation about kind of economy, okay, for example, if you don't want to be just crafting all of your Muxuses and all of your Craterhoof Behemoths and all this other stuff, you can't buy your Jumpstart packs, right? You can't just save up a bunch of gold and buy a bunch of Jumpstart product. You have to actually participate in the event and play the thing, which I think was by design. They wanted people to play the set, but it just raises all kinds of issues as far as collection management, actually acquiring the cards, etc. So from an implementation on Arena standpoint, it's just a total ass.
Yeah. We also didn't touch on the fact that the paper product has some cards that were just inexplicably left out of Arena.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like Lightning Bolt.
Oh, it's becoming quite a problem card on Arena.
Maybe that Baneslayer Angel wouldn't have caused you so much trouble if you just Path to Exiled it, but they didn't. They cut that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Would have been nice.
So, I'm also, I found Jumpstart to be too low powered for me. And I thought that was my bias, that I don't like limited usually because of that. To hear you say that as a limited player, ugh, I have standards, okay? I don't just put these absolute trash cards in my deck. I'm like, okay, I get it. But I think a lot of people like it. I am kind of, it was such a sneaky way to introduce some cards to Historic. Like the Mystical Archive is very on the nose. But Jumpstart was a sneaky way to mess up that format, in my opinion, and
especially since the card pool is vast. I mean, I don't remember. It's 1,000 cards.
It's a lot of cards.
Or something.
Yeah, I tried to set review it. I quit after an hour.
And I mean, it's just one of those annoying formats where someone mentions some random old, this isn't in the format, but they'll mention something Noble Hierarch or something, right? And you'll be like, oh, that's not on Arena. And then someone will be like, technically it is because it's in Jumpstart. And you're just like, well,
Noble Hierarch, for the record, is not in Arena.
It's not. But that's just an example of there are just these rando cards that made that they kind of slipped in under the radar in Jumpstart. And so, yeah, if you're wondering whether a card is in Historic, now you have to double check.
Yep, people don't like that sometimes. So anyway, I'm going to move to the next one. This is an interesting one. I swear you've talked about this on the show, but I don't remember. So Arena Cube is live right now and will be live until June 8th. This updated cube list features cards from the Mystical Archive. So, Cube on Arena, the Arena Cube, gas or ass?
Overall, I would say gas. Cube is an important part of keeping Magic fun in the long term for people. Magic Online has discovered this. I would say one of the most consistently popular formats on Magic Online is the Cube. And it's one of the things that really keeps that platform going. And I think that over time on Arena, it's going to be the same way. As people play more and more of Arena and they get more and more tired of these established formats, they're going to be looking for fresh things to do. And especially for people who play limited, if you watch like Deathsea, for example, who probably plays like 50 or even 60 hours a week of limited on Arena, and you watch him like over the weeks, he like slumps lower and lower in his chair when he's like, great, another Silver Quill deck in this format. And here's the interesting thing about limited, right? Is that you can think to yourself, limited, it has more variety than constructed because every draft is different and every deck is different. And while that's true, one of the kind of under-publicized shortcomings of limited is that there are a number of archetypes and they're the best archetypes, and there are a number of cards that are the best cards in those decks. And over time, you get forced into playing the same cards in a limited format. And it's very, very uncommon. It's like 1 in 10 drafts or something where you get to put together some fabulous, exciting new deck. But a lot of the time, if you want to win at limited, you just have to draft like the same whatever deck, right? The same Silver Quill deck, the same Prismari deck. And they start to look really, really similar. And it gets soul-crushingly boring to keep playing the same format. And in Constructed, you get tired of a deck, you switch to a different deck. You get tired of that deck, you switch to a different deck. You can kind of do it on command. As soon as you feel bored, you switch it up, right?
But Cube...
Sorry, okay. I went on a rant there. I guess I'm feeling a bit ranty today. So Cube is a godsend for people like Deathsea because it's a whole new limited format to get into. And I think that this current one is really good. There have been previous iterations of the Cube that I found quite boring, but I think that this particular mix of cards, for me personally, has been very fun. Perhaps I'm riding on the high of like the last 2 Cube streams I've done, like me trophying with LS Non Selesnya ramp decks. So that's a highlight. But yeah, I think this current iteration is total gas. And I think Cube in general is gas.
Nice. I got to, last weekend, some people came up, rented a cabin, and invited me over. I got to play Vintage Paper Cube. LSV's Cube.
That is a hell of a drug.
I don't know if I can do a normal Cube after drafting Ancestral Recall first pick and Snapcaster Mage second pick and Mystical Tutor at some point later ever again. But that is when like they already have like some power coded into Arena. We've talked about this before. They used it on some weird hype event for Theros. But it like Vintage Cube with those cards on Arena, I would play that. This, I'm not interested yet. It just looks like bad versions of constructed decks I've played 100 times, to be honest.
Which is totally fair. That is a fair criticism of it, and it can feel that way sometimes.
But I will, oh yeah, as soon as I can draft me an Ancestral Recall again, let's go.
It might happen.
It might. It should. Mm-hmm. I mean, why shouldn't they? They already coded them. Let's do busted stuff. Let's go.
Oh, Snapcaster on Arena. I am ready.
All right.
Ready.
So the last one here is Historic Brawl. It is coming on June 18th. It will be available. From June 19th. Let's see. Okay, so June 18th is a Friday. The FNM at Home event will feature 100 card Historic Brawl event for free to try it out. Then on June 19th through 25th, the 100 card Historic Brawl Fest event will be running. So you get a week and you get the first day to try it out for free. This is 100 cards, it's historic, and it's Brawl, so this is the closest they've come to Commander on MTG Arena. Is it gas or ass, Arjuna?
Total gas.
Total gas.
This is the format that people want. I mean, let's be honest. If there's one thing which people have been clamoring for since the inception of Arena, it's make Historic Brawl a regular format. Make this a queue that people can go into anytime they want. And it's a sore spot. I mean, frankly, there's obviously a reason they don't want to do it, but it's you know, and it's possible. Here's where I put on my like theory brain thinking cap, my freaking QAnon believer, a conspiracy theory cap. But I think the combination of Historic Brawl being a really fun format, a really varied format, and a really budget-friendly format might right there be the reason that they haven't instituted it as a regular queue on Arena, because frankly, people just wouldn't spend money if they could spend all day playing this format. So I think that, you know, Historic Brawl with 60 cards was already a great format, and I really like the 100 cards because it's Commander. Like,
yeah,
this is basically, from my understanding of the format, it's Commander, and the only difference is just that the card pool is a lot smaller.
If you have,
right?
Yeah. If you have never played like singleton 100 card format and you find it kind of intimidating because maybe something that you like about Standard is that you have a strategy and you know how to enact your strategy and you build for consistency and you try to do the same thing every single game. And if you think that that's not replicable in a 100 card singleton format with a Commander, I will tell you it is very doable. Like, you can all that you need is a Commander with a clear theme, and there are enough cards to go around most of those themes right now in Historic Brawl. And I'm really excited about this format. I'm really excited to try it with 100 because I did start to feel like 60 was too small. I was playing a lot of the same cards over and over. What, like Once Upon a Time in Uro come to mind as a few of the busted cards available in Historic Brawl that just should be in your deck if they're in these colors. And certain things just started to, like, I started to just build my decks very 1, 2, 3, you know, Treasure Map, Arcane Signet, Tome of Legends. Like, I run these cards in everything. And then it only left me so many spots to work with. I think it's going to be fun to figure out the 100 card puzzle again. So I think this is a great time to introduce it. We've introduced so many powerful cards to Historic through the archive that they also made a lot of Historic Brawl decks seem samey, because of course you're going to run Brainstorm, etc. But yeah, this is going to be awesome, and I'm going to try to put some decks on the channel for this, because I know that from feedback I hear from players who play Standard, they want to get into Brawl, but they don't, like, building a deck feels like too much because of all the singleton cards. It's just, it's overwhelming. So my Brawl videos, like the downloads on the deck list, have like been really amazing, like more than some of my Standard videos. So I'm going to try to get some 100 card lists for Historic Brawl out there because I want people to play this. You and I have said this off stream before, or I've said it to you, but I was a doubter of Commander for a long time. And then I started playing it, and then I, kind of experienced it with some of these powerful cards that have been introduced in the last few years. While the Standard meta and the Historic meta get solved and beaten into the ground, and it gets exhausting, the singleton formats like Brawl they don't lose that shine very often. They really don't. And I do think it is the better way to play Magic. I think that in a modern digital sense, formats are going to get solved quickly. And if they're not going to release more sets, though they're working on that, and if they're not going to ban cards more, which they're working on that, and if they're never going to nerf cards, which they're testing that, like, all these things they're trying to do to keep the format fresh. But I just don't get tired playing Commander. I don't get tired playing Brawl. Like, every game is kind of unique and different as long as one of two things don't happen. One, you draw lands. This is a universal truth in Magic. Two, the person doesn't combo, like somebody at the table doesn't combo kill you on turn 3 or whatever. If those two things don't happen, you're probably going to play a unique, interesting game of Magic. And I think that's a promise that Standard and Historic just can't offer for the entirety of a format.
I totally agree. I mean, speaking as someone whose latest frustration on Arena is opponent playing turn 1 Llanowar Elf, every single game of every single match. It's like, cool, I get it. You had it that one game, but like I play best of 3, and when the opponent has it every turn 1 of a 3-game match, like I want to flip the table, dude. I want to flip the table. You only get to put 4 of those in your deck, right? I'm pretty sure. So I mean, come on, man. It's not like they're mulling to 5 for it either. So yeah, I totally agree. And here's the thing, man. It's like 100 cards is 66% more cards than 60 cards is. And so like if you're comparing it to the, you know, the regular standard size deck. So yeah, if you're tired of like your opponent lose, you know, if you're tired of losing to Ugin, for example, which is a very popular card in these singleton formats, it really just comes up a lot less in 100 card decks than it does in 60 card decks. And I agree, man. It's a really fun way to play Magic. I think one of the things I like most about singleton formats is that you have to have a plan. Like you can't like in a 60 card format, you can, you know, build a deck with just a bunch of strong cards that kind of work together and you kind of get there and it's fine. But in singleton, like if your deck doesn't have a plan and if it's not synergistic with your commander, it's just going nowhere basically. So I feel like it reinforces a lot of the foundational core ideas of what makes people good at Magic and what you have to consider when you're playing Magic. And I agree. It's a wonderful way to play. It provides a lot of longevity for the game. It makes cards that were otherwise memey or bad or ridiculous or overlooked have a moment to shine. And it also speaks to the Vorthos in us, right? And if y'all aren't familiar with that term, Vorthos is like the people who really enjoy the flavor of Magic and they enjoy the story of Magic. And it gives people who like to express themselves a chance to do that. And one of my favorite things about formats like these is obviously, you know, you can play them competitively, as I'm sure you do, CGB. You like to win. That's one thing I've ascertained about Covert Go Blue is he likes to win. But, you know, for a lot of people such as myself who sometimes don't care that much about winning, I like just building awful decks and playing them, right? And these commandery formats give you a chance to do that. And for some reason, it turns off the spike in me. Like, I can just sleeve up some bad deck and lose most of the time. And every once in a while I win. And that's enough for me in singleton formats. So yeah, I think that this, I don't know. I think if Arena is going to survive long-term as a platform, I feel like we need to have more of this. And I would like to see it in a queue.
I agree. Total gas.
Total gas. Which I think, I hope, I pray, I try to describe our podcast every week. And thank you for joining us for another week of the ArenaCraft podcast. It's always a pleasure to do these for you. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting us on Patreon. That's a great way that you can help keep this show going, help keep a smile on CGB's face, help both of us pay our rent. So patreon.com/ArenaCraft podcast. You can find us there. You can also find us on a number of platforms. Yes, we're on Spotify. Every week, someone has trouble finding us on Spotify. We are there. You can also watch this. You can watch this on Covert Go Blue's YouTube channel. If you are a listener, you can see the funny expressions he's making with his face right now. If you are watching this on CGB's channel, you can also take us on the road with you on your podcast player of choice. So keep that in mind as well.
But is it on Spotify? I can't find it on Spotify.
Is it not on Spotify, Covert Go Blue? It is.
It is. It's on Spotify.
Look again.
I listen on Spotify.
Again. Scroll. Keep scrolling.
Okay.
Scrolling. You can catch Covert Go Blue streaming on Twitch regularly during the week. I've been streaming a fair amount lately. Twitch.tv/ArenaCraft podcast. So you can catch me doing that too. I've been cubing. And all right, CGB. I look forward to catching you next week in the Groundhog's Day time continuum known as the ArenaCraft podcast, which somehow manages to happen every single week. It's a miracle. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, man.
Later, crafties. wibbly wobbly, wibbly wobbly, tiny, whiny thing